Hi everybody, it's Meg from Books Off the Beaten Path, and today we're going to be talking about adventure fiction. Now, I had been referring to this jokingly as man fiction because this is the stuff that my husband always reads and that I assume a lot of other men read. But my husband pointed out how very sexist that is of me, and I certainly don't want to be accused of being sexist, so we're going to stick with adventure fiction. And what is it? And why you should be reading it. And I've got some authors here. Some I've read, some I haven't read, but it's going to be totally fun. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about, I've got all my notes here because I really researched this one. It took me a while because it's not a genre that I'm super familiar with, but I do enjoy occasionally. So what makes adventure fiction? Well, the first thing is the storyline is focused on action. It's plot driven. It's not character driven, it's plot driven. There will also be often a time component to it, a time limit. Like we have to get the bomb diffused before the president gets there, or we have to get the prisoners out before the sandstorm comes, or something like that. So it's action driven, often has a time limit. There is one hero, and you know who he is. We are not messing around with moral ambiguity. We're not messing around with moral ambiguity. We know exactly who our hero is, and we're going to stick with him being the hero the whole time. So like Tom Clancy has Jack Ryan, Clive Cussler has Dirk Pitt, Ian Fleming has James Bond. We know who our hero is. And the hero is able to solve problems using skill and his wits, but he's also a fighter. He's got weapons, he's got brawn. He's not going to talk you off that ledge. He's either going to or take you down with him when he goes down. So action-based, we know who our hero is. The pacing is fast. It's a fast-paced book. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a quick read. And I'll tell you about that when I start showing you some of the books I've gotten. But it's a fast pace. It's a breakneck pace. And setting is very important in these. So just think about your average James Bond. In your average James Bond, you're going to be in London. You're going to be usually in someplace tropical. And then you might be, in Switzerland or something like that. And that holds true for pretty much all of the adventure novels, or at least for all the adventure novels that I have picked out. Historically classified just as adventure epics, they put down the Odyssey, not the Iliad, interestingly. And I don't know why what I was reading was saying that it was more the Odyssey, but I guess it was more that they were trying to achieve a goal. And then Beowulf. But I would definitely agree with Beowulf, and I would definitely agree with the Odyssey, but I myself would throw in the Iliad because that was pretty warfare, that was pretty adventure-based, but I don't know. Okay, so those are our characteristics. Now let's talk about some authors who are famous and who do it really, really well. So I'm going to give you some interesting facts about these authors, and I'm going to tell you who I have read and who I haven't read. So the first one we've got here is it Webb Griffin or W.E.B. Griffin? I don't know. I don't know if he likes to be called Webb or if he likes to be called W.E.B. or if he likes to be called Bob. I don't know. But anyway, he is 100% former military. He was in World War II. And he was a counterintelligence officer in World War II, which I thought was fascinating. And one of his jobs was he took food. He delivered food to some of the higher up Nazis. And so, but I mean, this is very military based. Now, you notice it's kind of a thick book. Remember how I said before they're a brisk pace, but they're not necessarily a fast read? We've got in this one right here, in this book right here, we are talking about, let me just give you an overview of this. This is about the Cold War. So World War II is finished, and they're just forming the CIA, and they're going to kind of do Cold War battle with the Soviet Union. So we've got war stuff, we've got espionage, and he is super popular. He is always on some of the bestseller lists. I personally have not read any of his books, but they look good. So maybe I will. Probably won't, but maybe I will. All right, here's another one. Do you guys remember The Eagle Has Landed? They made a movie out of it. Well, maybe that dates me. I remember that. But it was based on a book by Jack Higgins, who is very espionage. He is Mr. Espionage. And look at this picture on the back. I know you can't see it because I got it from the library. It has a little library barcode, but isn't that Mr. Espionage right there with his glasses and everything? Anyway, so in this one, it starts out with the president is in this building, and then across the street in another high-rise, there's a sniper who's getting ready to take him out. So it starts action-packed. It goes from New York to London to Iraq. I mean, we're all over the place in this one. It's just, Jack Higgins is, again, he is very, very popular. I have not read any of his, but if you guys think I should, please put that in the comments. Leave me a comment. Leave me a comment about which of these is your favorites, or which you're like, don't bother. You need to read it. All right, so now we're getting into one that I actually read. Woo! Good for me. I loved the movie Hunt for Red October. And so, of course, I had to read the book. Now, this was my first Tom Clancy, and I am ashamed to say my only Tom Clancy, because I did enjoy it. I really did, but not as much as the movie, because it was so detailed. And Tom Clancy is known for that. And I guess I'm just sort of a big picture person. Like, I don't need to know all the ins and outs of the submarine. I'm just, it goes underwater. I'm good. That's all I need. It goes underwater. But you get all the ins and outs on this one. But you do get Jack Ryan, who is a fantastic character. He's a fantastic hero. He's a thinker, not necessarily a fighter, but he can hold his own. So Tom Clancy is another adventure fiction, and gosh, he is just worldwide popular. And so give me another one to read. I haven't read any of these others, but give me another one to read. So there's Tom Clancy. Okay, so now we're going to get into Hubbys Favorites, which have become my favorites, because oftentimes my husband will read something and he'll recommend it to me. And sometimes I'll say, oh, great, I would love to read that. I think that's great. And other times I would say, well, I don't know, and everything like that. And then I'll recommend something for my husband to read, and he always says no. So not fair, but at least, what we're trying 31 years making it work. But anyway, so who did I love? I love Clive Cussler. And more importantly, I love Dirk Pitt. Now, Clive Cussler is the real deal. He is the chairman, I believe, or the president of NUMA. And NUMA stands for, let me look it up here, National Underwater and Marine Agency. And they've actually found a bunch of shipwrecks and everything. And you can find some there's at least one nonfiction book that, of course, I couldn't get. And I'll put it up here when I remember the title. But it's just fantastic. And Dirk Pitt, I mean, he is adventure all the way. He is your classic hero. He's almost a comic book hero, but not really. Because if I say he's a comic book hero, I feel like that diminishes him in some way. And I really don't want to do that. I don't want to diminish him. But he's wonderful. Now, in Trojan Odyssey, what they're doing is they're looking for, there's like this brown, sludgy stuff in the ocean, and they're trying to figure out what it is. And as they're trying to figure out what it is, they find something even more alarming in this big storm and everything. And I don't remember all of it, but I just remember enjoying it. I did enjoy it. I thought it was great. And I brought another Clive Cussler because he has another recurring character who is Kurt Austin. And this one is called The Pharaoh's Secret. Now, this one is a little bit more, I'm not sure about this one. Let me just read this here. If legends are true, the dead don't stay that way for long in Egypt. For the Numa crew, the promise of these old stories might be their only hope of survival. When nearly the entire team is exposed to a dangerous substance called the Black Mist while working on an Italian island, they and the rest of the town fall into a dreamlike sleep. And their own men and women on the line, Kurt Austin and Joe Zalva, must race to find a cure. See, that's a little, I don't know. I'm not sure about that one because that seems a little fantastic. It seems a little comic book to me. And I don't really when I like my adventure stuff, I'm not really into too much of the comic book. And I think this is a little comic book part. A little comic book-like, I guess is what I'd say. Okay, now we're getting to some of my personal faves. I love, love, love Bernard Cornwell. Oh, I love him. And if you guys haven't read Sharp's Rifles, Richard Sharp, The Green Jackets, if you guys haven't read this, you are missing out. It takes place during the Napoleonic Wars. You follow the main character, Richard Sharp, as he tries to lead his battalion through the Napoleonic Wars and everything that they go through and stuff. And I will admit that I did not come to this with literary intentions in mind. Years ago, I saw on PBS, a couple of Sharp's Rifles episodes. And they had Sean Bean and I'll put a picture up here, in his Sharp outfit. Oh my gosh, I fell in so much love. I just thought, who is this hero? Where have you been my whole life? And so I picked up the books, and the books did not disappoint. The books are very close to the TV series, and I'm telling you, Sharp is fantastic. And Bernard, like I know him, he has done so much research. It's really, really fascinating. One of the things I learned is when they're in the gun battles, the particular type of gun that they used during the Napoleonic Wars would get clogged up with gunpowder and everything like that. That noise you're hearing is Twitch. She has come up on the table here, but you can't see her. And she's rustling around in my notes. Anyway, so this particular type of gun would get gunked up with the gunpowder and the heat from the balls that, they would put in there, the sharp metal balls and everything. And so they would have to urinate into the guns during the battle in order to clean them out. And I just thought that was such an interesting fact that somebody researched that and then put it in the book and it's legit. I mean, I don't know. I don't know why I found that so interesting, but I did. I found that so interesting because you're in the middle of the battle. I don't know that I would feel comfortable doing that, but I'm not a guy, so I don't know. Maybe it's a guy thing. I don't know. I wanted to include this other book. My last episode was all about Shakespeare, and I happened to find that Bernard Cornwell actually wrote a little Shakespeare action and adventure one that I had never even heard of until I went to the library to research and to get my Bernard Cornwell books. He's also written kind of is it a King Arthur series? It's a very, very early England series, almost pre-medieval. And I can recommend that one also. He's big in series and he's big in recurring characters and everything like that, which I really appreciate. I really think that's fantastic. But this one is about Shakespeare's brother, Richard, on his own action adventure. And I just thought, oh, that's cool. Bernard Cornwell. And I haven't read it yet, but I do plan to read this because anything Shakespeare and anything Bernard Cornwell, how can I go wrong? Okay, so finally, for the pièce de résistance. We know him, we love him. That's right, James Bond. Now, I went through a phase in my 20s when I read every James Bond book in order. I read them all in order, and I loved them so much. But reading them at that point in my life, is very different than from rereading them when I'm in my 50s. And I just want to, just for a second here, and I'm going to say a bad word, so I hope YouTube doesn't cut me off. I just want to read this to you. So this is a little section. This is Goldfinger. And so I'm not going to set the stage or anything like that, but just listen. Okay. Bond slowly, wearily bent his head and looked at the ground between his spread hands. It was the girl, Tilly. She must have been watching the buildings below. She had a rifle that must have been among the innocent golf clubs, ready to fire on them. Damn and blast that silly bitch. Bond slowly relaxed. It didn't matter who she was or what she was up to. He measured the distance, planned each stride, the trajectory of the final spring, left hand to her neck, right hand to the gun. Now. So, reading it now, James Bond, I realize the movies softened him in a way because he's really pretty harsh. He's really, really pretty harsh when you're actually reading the books. I would recommend them highly. But I don't want to say they're nothing like the movies because the movies have the same plots. But I think that by far the best James Bond we've ever had is Daniel Craig because I think he has that edgy, even more than Sean Connery. But James Bond was not particularly a nice guy. He was a killer and he knew he was a killer and he in a way kind of delighted in being a killer. He delighted in doing his job well. Did not have much respect for the ladies at all. Often in the movies, you'll see they hint at or imply that he has relationships with them and that he sort of falls in love with them and everything like that. Except for the last movie that Daniel Craig was in. And spoiler alert, if you haven't seen that, there is a child involved in that one, and he softens quite a bit, sort of towards the end of that one. But there's no real relationships that he has in the books, and he's very style conscious. He's very class conscious. Another thing that you will notice when you're reading a James Bond book is that none of the villains are British. They're all foreign. So, bearing that in mind, when I was doing my research and I was at the library, I picked up this book. And doesn't it have a great cover? It's called The Man Who Saved Britain, A Personal Journey into the Disturbing World of James Bond. And I've started reading a little bit, and it is very good. The premise of it is that Ian Fleming was trying his best to bolster his religion, and I say religion like this, but it was his patriotism. He loved Britain, and he thought that, the English were just the best at everything, and so he made this character who was basically going to save the world by being British. British's best of the best spy, the best hired killer, there's Twitch, the best assassin, the best lover, the best thinker, and he was British. And another fun fact about James Bond is that the name James Bond he lived down in Jamaica. Ian Fleming spent a lot of time in Jamaica, and if you read the books, there's a lot of talk of Blue Mountain coffee, which I've actually tried. I tried when I was reading the books, and it's supposedly the best coffee in the world, or at least it was at the time. And it comes from Jamaica, and that's James Bond's favorite. That's his favorite coffee is Blue Mountain coffee. And the name James Bond actually came from an ornithologist, somebody who studied birds, and it was just a bird watcher guy who wrote a book about the exotic birds of Jamaica or something like that, James Bond. And Ian Fleming loved that name. He loved it. He thought it was very masculine. He thought it was very short and concise. And so he loved that name. And so he named his character James Bond. So I've read James Bond. I've read Tom Clancy. I've read Bernard Cornwell. I've read Clive Cussler. All right, we have the very, very last ones. I have to go off screen here just a second to get it, because these are the two that these are the ones that my husband, I only have one, is really into right now. And that, I think, is in a class all by itself. And that is the Navy SEAL action adventure. We start off our very first one that sort of came out, at least the first one that I became familiar with, is Richard Marchinko. My husband has every single one of these books, and I have read two of them. Let me show you a picture of Richard. Look at Richard. Isn't he tough? He is pretty tough. And he's a Navy SEAL, and he talks about, his fiction is very to the point, of being a Navy SEAL and what that experience is like. And he also has a nonfiction business book, which I'll post up here, which I read, which I thought was fascinating. I'm still going through, one of the things he talks about in the business book is lead from the front. And I love that philosophy. I thought that was great. So I will put that up there if I can remember to do that. I keep pointing it like at the lamp. So the lamp's going to do something. And then the last one that I have is my husband's newest, brand new favorite, and he wants me to read it, and I haven't done it yet. And it's Jack Carr. Jack Carr himself was a former Navy SEAL, and he writes about Navy SEALs. And what is a Navy SEAL? A Navy SEAL is the ultimate hero. They jump out of planes, they swim underwater, they're snipers, they're smart, but they're a team. As opposed to James Bond kind of working by himself, they are a team, they are a group. And so you get that group dynamic with the Navy SEALs and everything. Haven't read Jack Carr yet, but I'm going to because hubby really recommends it. All right, so adventure books. You don't have to be a man. You don't have to be into the military. You just have to open up your mind a little bit and decide that you want to read some great history or some great espionage, and you'll really enjoy it. If you enjoyed the action movies, see if you can find the book that goes with it, and I think you'll enjoy it just as well. Well, thanks so much for watching today. Please hit that subscribe button. Give me a like. I want to say hello to all my new subscribers. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys being here, and I'll catch you next time.